You're listening to SEEK Bytes, a podcast for software engineers by software engineers. Today's episode covers a major telecom outage in Australia, and we discuss incident management. We talk about the OpenAI Dev Day and the exciting new features announced for ChatGPT, and we end on data backup horror stories and the hard drives that could delete all of your data unannounced. So today on the podcast, we don't really have specific topics. It's another Mixed Byte episode where we talk about some hot topics and some just a mixed bag of things. So we're not going to deep dive into anything specific. It's more just kind of a round table of chatter about kind of what's going on. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it, is recently here in Australia, Optus, the second biggest telco provider, was down for 8 hours from 4 in the morning to
14 hours. 10 million customers affected.
That's insane.
That is insane.
That's second largest. And do you guys know, was it just like the mobile cellular that was affected? That's what I understood.
I'm fairly confident that people's home internet was down as well, because we had engineers that weren't able to come online and work. They had to go to a cafe to work. So I would assume that it was not just the mobile network.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, and I saw that there were Optus shops, just no one was there, because obviously people are going to go in for support, and it'll just be flooded. But I think that is really, we're talking about incident management, right? We're talking about communication and how to manage incidents, and in this specific incident, which is really catastrophic. This is the worst thing that you could imagine. Your platform being down for
the federal government has announced an investigation into it. So imagine your platform having such a catastrophic failure that your nation's government launched an investigation into the impact and the cause.
I mean, that really is like a Thanos level threat.
Oh yeah, someone snapped and half the world's communication, half of Australia's communication went down.
I'd hate to be the person on that get blame.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. So now we're talking about this is all speculation here. We absolutely do not know what happened. But do you guys think it was something that happened internally that happened? Or I know people have said hackers and all that stuff. I have no idea.
I'll pull up the information. I saw an article this morning. I foolishly didn't save the link. I got the impression that it was software related. I thought that it would have to be hardware related for it to be actually no, I guess it would make more sense for it to be software related, for it to be so widespread, right? For it to affect such a large part of the network. I'll find that link.
Yeah,
continue.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I certainly don't believe it was someone hacking into something. I don't know. I've just, particularly working in a tech company, having something being hacked to that degree and causing everything to shut down feels unfathomable to me. Something must have I just feel even if someone somehow hacked SEEK, your services would be set up in a way that nothing should break to that degree.
One would hope. One would hope,
right?
Melbourne's rail network and hospitals were impacted as well.
Oh, damn, not the hospitals.
We were just talking this morning about universities have backbone infrastructure. So if you go on speed test on it or whatever, and you test your speed, when you're connected to a university network, it'll show up as the name of the university as the ISP. They are their own ISP. They have crazy fast internet speeds.
Wow, interesting.
Because they need to, but also because they were one of the founding essentially it's one of the industries responsible for building all of the network in the first place. So they essentially they got dibs on the network from day one. But I was curious what happens in this kind of situation, who would be impacted. I wouldn't have imagined that hospitals would be impacted. I would think that I would have thought that if universities had backbone infrastructure access, that hospitals would. Doesn't seem to be the case.
Backbone infrastructure access. What do you mean by that?
So they're not going through a service provider. They've got their own, they own a part of the network that connects them to the rest of the world, essentially.
I see. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like what people are saying is the likely culprit is a firmware update to the border gateway protocol, which is responsible for basically internet traffic. It's responsible for working out what the most efficient route is from one piece of the network to another. And so according to their engineers, because their updates usually happen to 4 a.m. sort of in the morning, and this is roughly when it started, it's assumed to be an update related thing. I would assume, knowing what I know about engineering, probably someone uploaded a misconfigured network configuration file. Whatever it is, the things that they can determine from the publicly available information is that it was a flood of the border gateway protocol.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't ruled out if it's malicious or not, but Optus have said that there's no indication of it.
Yeah, it seems unlikely. Seems unlikely, but who knows?
If it was a mistake and not malicious, somebody needs smoke tests.
But what's your DR on something like that? You're like, a key piece of your infrastructure goes down. It's like, well, we don't really have a replacement for this one key piece of infrastructure. So if it goes down, it's like, well, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, panic. Everything's on fire.
Yeah, and it is going to be a costly day, not even just from today, not having customers and stuff, but just like the ramification of the future, like the image of what it might look like for something to be down. Like it's certainly not a good look. I do hope that they are able to respond back in a good way. Like it does suck to see when something tanks so hard.
It does make you think though, like how different it is working on systems that don't have that kind of negative impact. Like if our entire system goes down, people can't apply for jobs, look for jobs,
post jobs,
can't post ads for their jobs.
SEEK will obviously lose money, which is awful for SEEK, and for the people looking for jobs, that would be an awful experience. There is real customer and people impact, but it's not. I'd hope, thankfully, it's not like a medical industry.
Like communication is a core piece of like infrastructure to society.
That's right. Yeah. Like other people's businesses will still continue even if SEEK went down for 14 hours, right? Because
imagine if a bank went down for 14 hours.
Yeah,
you couldn't make transactions. Any transactions that went through, just like from what I understand, for banks, if they go down for more than 30 minutes in an unplanned outage, they have to report that to some body in Australia.
That makes sense. Yeah,
I should know. I've been told before, but I've forgotten.
I'm sure that telecommunications
they would have had to.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
I remember because I used to work at Telstra, and I recall some of the scripted things that you have to say whenever you're talking to customers. They would have to have some kind of reporting thing because they support infrastructure for medical devices that have alarms built on the network. Anybody in the know or keeping up to speed with the latest developer conferences would have heard that OpenAI had their first developer conference this week. Some pretty interesting stuff coming out from that. I think probably one of the big ones is, actually I think a few of these are pretty big. They're introducing custom GPT. So you're for organizations that have large proprietary data sets that want to be able to produce their own ChatGPT, their own GPT. You can, or I don't think that you can do it now, soon, because they just mentioned that they are working on it. So it's in development, the ability to create custom models. So that's pretty exciting for all the companies that have proprietary data. Like we talk about all the time as engineers, how amazing it would be to be able to point ChatGPT at our own code bases and then have it give us, infer what the code should do, what the next steps should be in the work that we're doing. And, we've got GitHub Copilot. Like there are tools that we can use and they work pretty well. And when you know how to manipulate them to get them to produce some usable output. But I think that would pale in comparison to something that actually understands how we write code, the way that we write code, the way that our infrastructure is set up. Because I imagine, without being an AI expert, that that kind of model should be able to rationalize how essentially identify how your infrastructure is connected. If it's able to look at all your different code bases, would it not be able to see the configuration of them and map, endpoints to endpoints? And I can see you're calling this API. I can see your configuration points to this endpoint. I can see that system is behind that endpoint. So it essentially can infer what your entire network looks like across all of your microservices.
I mean,
I would hope that's the outcome. That's what I imagine when I see custom models against proprietary data.
That would be really cool. And when I hear that, I'm like, so if the AI, let's say we're in the world of this future, it's been given, and we're working at a company that has done that. and the AI knows all of your code, all of your infrastructure, surely you could then be like, so where are my security vulnerabilities? Like what inefficiencies do I have? How can I make this better? Like, can it do that? Or is it just predictive still?
Well, yeah, that's what because you said like it'll understand our code. Is that the right wording? I've always thought that like it doesn't understand the code. It's just like you're giving it some information, and if you ask it a question, it'll spit that information back out.
Well, that's a good point, right? Like it's worth highlighting that it's a language model.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a network. It's a weighted network, or I don't know exactly what an LLM is, but what I know about neural networks, I studied a little bit of AI, and I was AI tutor at uni for reference, so I have some idea about what I'm talking about. I'm
glad somebody does, because I definitely do not.
It's on some level, it's essentially trying to figure out what the highest weighted response is, right? Whatever the algorithm underneath is doing to figure out, that can be. There's many different ways to achieve that. That's a very high level summary of what an AI model is trying to do. Trying to figure out the best weighted response, right? And these ones are focused on language, so it's understanding how to communicate information in a way that makes your brain say, yes, that is what I want. That's how we know that when people experiment with these things, they fall into these weird loopholes where they think that things are true that aren't, because you've convinced it that's what you want to know. So yeah, when I say like, it could understand your network, I'm not insinuating that it can understand the complexity of engineering, like network engineering, more so that it can connect dots and make inferences between syntactical similarities. So I imagine that it would be able to determine where these things are the same or similar, like endpoints having the same URL, whatever.
Yeah.
These three systems all share the same endpoint, and they're all calling that system. They all have a gateway that's called contract gateway. Yep. Okay, cool. I can assume that this is a system that works on contracts, because that's what language is, right? It's all about inference. So when I say that I imagine that it could understand the network, I mean that I imagine it would be able to infer when multiple systems are talking about another system.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. I see it more as about like, I guess it's more like the documentation side, and more like I can ask it something and it can tell me it back, rather than having to find the right person and the right team and the right something. Like it's just for me, I see it as some quick way to get information. In saying that though, like the interaction between people and teams, I think is also very important. I'd hate to see it kind of like disband, like to see people use that more often than just like trying to interact with the other engineers around them. Because I think that is such an important part of building a good engineering team and engineering company, is that interaction between your engineers and not just them talking to software.
Absolutely. It should be a resource though. And I say that in terms of like good documentation, right? Will never replace talking to other engineers, but you reach a point of scale where you can't do that. Like not, if 100 new starters join, it's like, well, they can't go and all speak to Jim over in sales to find out. It's like, what's our most popular product? It's like, that's what documentation FAQs
How do you know to talk to Jim? And that's where I find
who is Jim?
That's where I think that these custom models will become.
Dead, Jim.
That's where I think these custom models will become much more useful than the more generic ChatGPT things that just has access, that everybody, like same information that everybody else has access to. When these things are fine-tuned, or they're only learning against a data set that is very specific, like all of our code, then it should be able to, or what I would find to be the most beneficial would be telling me who owns a system. Because this is something I've seen evolve in 3 or 4 different ways over the 5 years that I've been at SEEK. Who owns what system? As teams move around and, the ownership of things changes and systems become divided, and, we'll put this part of the system over here, this part of the system over here, 2 new teams. If the documentation isn't immediately updated, or until it's updated, how do you know who owns that system? Like something like ChatGPT should be able to work that out from a combination of things, I imagine. Like if it has access to Slack and it has access to GitHub, it can determine who's talking about the GitHub, who's been linking the GitHub the most, give you a stack of like, these are the people who talk about the repo the most, here's the 3 repos that do the thing you're asking about. Maybe it won't give you the exact person to talk to, but at least get you 90% of the way there, save you that time. And I think those kinds of interactions are where people will probably find the most, like, not cost cutting, but efficiency gains from something like a custom GPT model is it's access to information. Like not having to write the documentation about your system, because people don't use your docs anymore. They just go to the model and say, hey, who owns X? I need to understand X. It'll give you, or it should give you, a very easy to understand output, and hopefully something that is more specific to you that you can interact with and say, oh, I don't quite understand that. Can you go a little bit more, a little bit deeper in detail on that thing? Which I think like documentation is never going to be like that. We're never going to have docs that can expand and shrink based on the viewer.
Has OpenAI got anything else they're planning? Any other like cool release showcases?
Yeah, I think another big one that I imagine this one's probably relevant to anyone who's interested in ChatGPT, not just engineers. The new GPT-4 Turbo, I think it more than quadruples the, page size, token size. It has a 100, I'll read it because it'll be easier for me to read from OpenAI themselves. GPT-4 Turbo is more capable and has knowledge of world events up to April 2023. That's a big one.
That's right, yeah.
Having access to as close as possible to the latest information is a huge deal for these things. It also has a 128K context window, so it can fit the equivalent of more than 300 pages of text in a single prompt. So something that a lot of people have had issues with is the longer you talk to a thing, the more weird it gets, or it eventually reaches a limit where it can't hold any more information. You've reached your allotted memory for this your instance of the model to grow, right? So
that's huge.
It's massive, yeah. It's
what was it before?
So I do have a table. Give me 1 second.
Because that is a lot of pages.
It's pretty massive.
Yeah.
So GPT 3.5 had almost 16,500 tokens. GPT 3.5 Turbo 4,000 tokens. GPT-4, so what people are on until this week when GPT-4 Turbo came out, and I think it's still beta, so people can there's an argument that you provide to the API to tell it that you want to use the new Turbo. The GPT-4 32K version had 32,000 tokens. Otherwise, it was just over 8,000 tokens. So we're talking about a jump from 32,000 tokens for like the already increased GPT-4 up to 128,000 tokens.
And so what was it again for the basic version? If you're on
the average person,
free version of GPT 3.5, I believe it is.
So GPT-3, this is just showing Turbo, so 16,000 tokens, but GPT-4 non-enhanced is 8,000 tokens, 8,192. So it's massive. It's a huge increase.
A very big jump, yeah.
Yeah. If you were on the 8K, it's more than 10 times.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. Pretty spicy. I've got to imagine, though, that the average user does not need that much.
No, definitely not the average user, but certainly companies are going to want something that big. An average user probably doesn't have the funds to pay for that every single month, right?
Well, funny that you talk about pricing because of this, because the optimizations they're able to make to allow this to allow these enhancements. It's actually 3 times cheaper.
What? Okay, wow.
That's
GPT-4 Turbo at a 3 times cheaper price for input tokens and 2 times cheaper price for output tokens.
What in the world?
Compared to GPT-4, yeah. So just from 4 for Turbo, it's 3 times cheaper for input and 2 times cheaper for output.
We're giving you a better product and we're going to make it cheaper.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what you want. That's what upgrades should be.
Yeah,
it shouldn't just be the same thing but more expensive. It should be a better thing and cheaper. This is why you want this one.
Yeah. Don't follow the PlayStation model where you go from the PS2 to the PS3 and suddenly it's 2 to 3 times expensive and nobody wants it. Yeah. They learned that lesson. I was talking about this just the other day. I remember the PS3 being very expensive, like way more expensive than it should be. It was $1,000.
Holy moly.
At launch.
Wow.
Wow, even the PS5 was less than that.
Yeah.
Is that the most
That's
recent?
crazy.
Yeah.
I can't remember if that was counting for inflation or not, but even if it was for inflation, if it was without inflation, that's bonkers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Let's assume that was with inflation. $1,000 today for a console is...
It's still insane because the PS5 still launched at what, $600? Like, that's...
People scalping it for less than $1,000.
Yeah, that's right. I have one last little topic. I didn't want it to be a big thing, but I just I read this article a little while ago about what is it? SanDisk. They have these hard drives which I mean, they're a very big hard drive company, right? But they have this specific model of hard drive which it's been having problems where out of the blue it will just delete all of the data on the hard drive.
Whoa!
With nothing prompted, like you just plug it in and it'll just be gone. And they apparently have said very little to it. They said we'll fix it and stuff, but apparently still to this day they still have and sell those hard drives.
Was it a very specific hard drive model? Was this just a flaw on all of their tech?
It's not.
That's wild.
It's certainly not on all of it. No, I think it's a very specific model, and you can certainly look it up. There's articles about this, and I just thought it was crazy that like that is something out there that happens, and it made me think about how I store my data. And I guess the question to you guys is, how do you guys store your data? Do you still use physical hard drives, or have you resorted to using cloud storage? And do you think cloud storage will ever just replace hard drives completely?
I have a horror story from talking about data storage stuff.
Okay.
Is it a university related one? Because I've got so many in the bank.
No, I had a spin disk in our family computer that we had like all through high school. It had all my like photos with friends, whatever else,
Spin disk, is that just a hard drive?
Like just a hard disk. I had a hard disk that was a spinning disk, so not an SSD. You know what I mean?
See.
So that's because it's an important part of the conversation.
It is, yep.
It's important. This is a mechanical hard drive. There's a reason why I mentioned that it's a mechanical hard drive. So we had this hard drive for years. We got a new family computer, and I took that hard drive into my personal computer when I eventually got one when I was like 17, 18 or whatever. And I kept that hard drive for a decade more, a long time. It lived in all my machines, and I never thought about it. Just never occurred to me to have a backup ever.
That is the backup, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
and one day in a very long, spicy LAN session, like 3-day long, hanging out at the friend's place all weekend long kind of thing, I just started smelling something burning, and I lost 10, 15 years of my life. Like hundreds. I used to write music and write songs. I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs that I'd written, recordings that I'd done, photos with friends, girlfriends and stuff, and all gone overnight. And I still don't take backups of my data.
Wow.
What I've decided is just don't have important data.
Oh, I mean that's the solution, right? Lower the bar.
Don't hold on to anything.
I use the Google auto upload thing, so all my photos automatically go up to Google now. So it's honestly, I don't have to think about data that much anymore. Anything that I find really critical, I just automatically just turn on auto updates, basically. Yeah.
I'm the same. Like I have no real need for hard disks anymore because these cloud storages hold so much of my life and my data, and I can access them anywhere. The only time maybe I can see it being useful is in a scenario like this where we're recording something to a physical hard disk, right? If we lose it, we're in trouble.
Well, this one's not a hard disk in the sense that it's a storage device.
Yeah,
it's not
SD.
A physical disk that's spinning.
Definitely.
Which, and I had a very similar thing happen to Seamus, actually. I recall that I must have been around 16, 17. There was a LAN at my house, and I plugged in this external hard drive, which I'd installed a bunch of games on, and I was super excited to play. And then I needed to plug it into somebody else's machine. I think we were doing the whole thing where you install games on Steam onto one thing, and then you can just copy them to all of the other devices as opposed to downloading it 15 times. And suddenly it was just like, wait, it disappeared. Unplug it, plug back in. No, it's gone. 2 terabytes gone. What? No.
Yeah, that's the worst feeling when you know it's gone and there's no way to like get it back.
And you're just like, what was on that drive now? I have no idea. And I remember taking it to a hard drive recovery specialist just to get a quote, because I was like, I don't know, maybe there was something important on there, because I think there had been photos and other things on there, but I was like, I just don't know now. And the quote was something in the vicinity of $1,000 to fix it, because they had a look and they were like, look, some specific part has broken, and in order to replace that, we have to do it in a clean room. We have to take apart the whole thing. And they're like, it's just unfortunate. And they're like, so we can do the recovery, but they're like, how important is the data? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty confident it is not that important, but I'll never know.
If you're at a stage where like I don't know what was on it, then it probably wasn't that important.
Yeah. I definitely know though, I've lost photos and other things just through the years of moving houses, moving devices, and so now I'm very similar in that I keep a lot of the important stuff on the cloud, and it's so if I lost my phone today, or if my phone broke and I couldn't get any data off it. It's like all the photos are just backed up to Google. And, you know, I take a lot of photos of kids and dogs and other stuff. And it's like not important to anyone else, but to me, you know, to be able to save that is you know, important. But then I've still got a ton of physical hard drives. Like I've got a physical hard drive enclosure sitting there with, I don't know what's on it, but it's not plugged into anything and I never use it because the effort to use it, as ridiculous as it sounds, is just like they're physical disks that take time to spin up, and then loading things off it is incredibly slow.
So slow. Yeah.
Whereas, you know, a 64 gigabyte USB 3 or USB-C is just instant by comparison. And it's just not going to randomly break because the spinning disk has failed. So...
Yeah, I don't think people understand how expensive data recovery is. You were talking about you got a quote for like $1,000 or something. I don't think you can get data recovery done cheaply. I worked in IT for most of a decade before I started in software, and one of the more common things is I've lost my data, and the answer is almost always there's almost nothing anyone can do unless you're prepared to pay like way more than you would possibly imagine for it. It's just because of the reasons like clean room and stuff like that, you know.
Do they bump up the price for sentimental reasons as well? It's like, well, it'll cost me $300 to do it, and it'll cost me an extra $600 because you really want me to do it.
100%, right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's like it feels borderline extortionist. Unless you're a corporation and it's like critical business data, and you can justify like the loss of this data is more expensive to us than that, then you justify it. I don't think there is like non-corporate level data recovery that anyone would be able to justify paying for. Like you would only pay for the recovery if it's for legal reasons.
That's right. If there's like a will.
Someone's will's on it, right? Yeah, 100%. It's the only way you would pay for it.
I would have, like, if that was the cost, if I knew there'd been critical stuff on there, you would have had to have done that. Yeah. So I did work experience at a company when I was a teenager, and I was, working in the IT department. I was there for a week. It was very exciting. I've always been a huge IT nerd, so I just love anything with computers, always have, since I was like 5, right? So for me, I was kind of like, this is getting a taste of industry and kind of like, this could be a career and whatnot. So it was very exciting. And one of the things they showed me was the server room. And this was this massive cold server room. And it was like, all the different servers. And they used hard drive tapes to do backups. And so they did nightly backups on every single server. And then they also did weekly and monthly backups that would then go off-site. So
I did these things. I remember doing these things.
Yeah. And so what would happen is there were these massive thick drives. They kind of looked like old VCR tapes.
Yeah.
And you would just literally, there was
handle.
just a slot. Yeah. There was just, well, these ones didn't even have a handle. If you imagine like a floppy disk, it was like 10 floppy disks.
Stacked together?
Yeah. We're kind of like stacked together. So it was maybe an inch thick and like 4 inches wide. And it would, you would just shove it in, and then you would click a button, and it would just clone all of the data. It would just wipe
all
it.
10 gigs of that data.
Well, it was. Some of them were pretty big.
Some of them were pretty big. The tape drives. Do you remember the old like?
Yeah. They had like a magnetic tape in there, and what would happen is, you just went through, and it was literally you would just go, and each day of the week they had a different box, so it didn't really matter what disk it went on, but you had to get the right day of the box out. So it was like, so if they had an outage, you knew what day you could go to. And
if I remember correctly, they only read sequentially. Like it could only read and write data like in and out. Like it read in and it read out, something like that. Like there was no, I can't remember there being, at least the disks that I was working with at the time, I remember it being just sequential. So it's just as fast as possible, just take this data, go and just direct copy, and then you can direct copy out. There was no like seeking capability.
Quick.
Yeah. Well, quick for the time, right?
Well, even still, I mean, if you compared trying to copy that amount of data with software, say dragging from one internal hard drive to another internal hard drive, significantly faster than that. So especially when we're talking about the amount of data, gigabytes worth of data for some of these drives. So that was really, really, really cool. And one of the servers went down at one point, which was, funny for me now in retrospect, but at the time, obviously there was a little bit of stuff going on, and for whatever reason the server was called Freight Train, and so they were like, Freight Train is down, Freight Train is down. And I remember one of the IT people got a phone call and somebody was like, "Is freight train on XL yet?" And then they hung up, and they were like, "What?" So I have no idea the context behind the person who called, but it became like a running joke for the rest of the week. They're like, "Hey, is freight train on XL yet?" So, but hard drive backups, this was it was a printing company, so they had, I don't know, however many hundred staff with different computers. And so, all of their stuff was centralized on the servers. So all of the users would log in, and then they would access their, partitioned bit of user drive on the Windows servers. And so everything would get backed up. And then, every night that's what they did. So at like 5 o'clock or whatever, they'd go in and shove all the tapes in, and then you just go from server to server and go click, 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 click on the physical button to start the recording. And then the next morning you would take them all out and put them in Monday's box, and then,
I've got friends that do offsite backups. I've got friends that do those things that like keep cataloged data. And life's too short. I don't have enough stuff. I moved across country when I've done it a couple of times actually. The first time I did it, I was 18, 19, and all my things fit into the back of my car. And I had a sports car. I had like a James Bond coupe, long bonnet, 2-seater. So saying all my stuff in my car was like guitar, skateboard, some clothes, my Xbox, my laptop.
Yeah.
That was like everything I owned, right? So for me, it seems quite overkill. I don't think I would find it necessary to hold on to anything that required offsite backups. Data retention changes drastically at scale, right? Like drastically, it changes at scale. And I think that's true even at an individual level. So for me, for example, I don't have a lot of critical information. I might have a lot of different small things, but the size of that data is so insignificant that I can rely on a streaming service. I could have a small amount of very large things. That solution doesn't work anymore. Like if I do YouTube videos and I maybe make one video a month, but that video is an hour long, that's a collection of large individual files that I'm combining into a project, right? They need to be kept together. They need to be organized in a way that the tool I'm using, like Adobe or whatever, can read them because it catalogs your files and stuff like that. And I used to do YouTube, and it's sort of coming back to me now. I'm having these like light bulbs. Like, I used to manage my data because you reach a point where you need to organize, these disks were for these projects, or these disks were from this year or this month. And that changes at scale. I mean, Linus Tech Tips do videos about how they catalog and manage all of their data, and that kind of shows you how extreme that specific use case can be. Like video editing, they have whole servers of what's above petabyte, zettabyte, something. I don't know.
How big does a kind of server get? Like if
extremely,
we will make new names. We will make. That's what we do. Petabyte. Petabyte didn't exist before we needed the name to come up with how do we describe thousands of terabytes. Well, peta. I'm not sure that necessarily related to technology, but those names come about because we need a way of describing numbers that are so large before we just didn't have a reason to name it.
So the question is, when will we get to 1 Googleplex of data?
That's the 1 Googleplex. Yeah,
soon.
So a Googleplex, if I recall correctly, is a number with 100 zeros.
Oh, that's right, yes.
So, a digit and then 100 zeros behind it is a Googleplex.
What about 0 with 100 zeros behind it?
No.
Data loses all meaning at that point to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even need to get to that point. That, like, if you start talking about, things of scale, the human mind just doesn't really comprehend it. If you talk about a million seconds versus a billion seconds, right? Like, if I recall, a million seconds is something in the vicinity of, a number of days, right? Like 27 days or something. I could double check this quite easily, but I'm just going to, say it incorrectly, and then somebody will correct me later. But then once you start talking about a billion seconds, though, just that singular jump, you're now in the number of years.
Yeah, right.
And like, so the scale, so if you then go above that and you're like a trillion, a quadrillion, a pentillion, you're like, so a pentillion bytes of data, like I have no concept of the scale of that anymore. But if you said, that's 1,000 hours of 8K video, I'd be like, okay, I have a concept of that now.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I can deal with 1,000 hours of a certain type of video. But when you're like, a petabyte of data, I'm like, I don't know what that looks like.
Anyway, that was a super interesting conversation. I just wanted to bring that up to get your thoughts. Did you have anything more you want to say about it, Seamus or Elliott?
Don't be like me, monkey see, monkey do. You should back up your data 100%. Don't live that pain. It's happened to me more than once. That's the most horrifying story. But yeah, after you've lost data a couple of times, you do what I do and you go full nomad and you say nothing matters, I don't care, or you really should back it up.
I used to do a lot of backing up. I did RAID 0 for a little while, where it was just like the same file was kind of split in half across two.
It's even riskier because now you got 2 failure points.
Yes, exactly. And I got burnt by that, and so I was like, no, need RAID 1. It's got to be RAID 1. You've got one direct copy, but it's a scale thing, right? When you're talking about a very small amount of data, one copy is kind of fine because it's usually quite cheap, but then suddenly you're like, if I need multiple copies, and it depends what you need it for, and it depends how important the data is to you. And I think no matter how much time and effort you put into preparing it and trying to make sure that everything is recoverable, it's like until something explodes and the worst happens, it's like, well, you won't really know how effective those backups are. And I recall having to go and get a backup at one point, and I'm like, I don't even know where I put that. I was like, it should be on a drive somewhere, and then searching for hours to be like, I don't know, can't have been that important.
More data, more problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Too much stuff.
All right, let's cut it there. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time on the SEEK Bytes podcast. I was Will.
I'm Seamus.
And I'm Elliott. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.